The Seleucid Machine, How an Empire Manufactured Judaism, by Nazorian Ray Taylor, Ph.D. There was a time when the hills of the Levant were filled with many gods. Villagers carved little clay figures for household shrines, burned incense to local spirits, and poured libations to whoever might bring rain or fertility. Before the 2nd century BCE, there was no single religious code governing all these people. The archaeologists who dig in that soil do not find a land ruled by Torah law. They find pig bones in kitchens, goddess figurines in houses, inscriptions to Baal and El, and the names of many deities carved into jars and seals. If a system of divine commandments was binding all Judeans at that time, it left no trace in the earth. That silence is the first clue. The story that a unified covenant religion began in the days of Moses or David is a later projection. The evidence on the ground shows variety, not unity. It shows Yahweh worshipped alongside other gods. It shows people using the same rituals as their Phoenician and Aramean neighbors. It shows that Israelite religion was local, flexible, and not governed by a central text. The great innovation came later, under a different flag. When the Seleucid Empire took the region after the conquests of Alexander, it inherited a diverse population and a strategic problem. The empire needed loyalty, taxes, and stability in a frontier province that had never truly been centralized. The Seleucids used a system familiar across their territories, control through temples. A temple was both a bank and a courthouse, and the priesthood functioned as a branch of government. In Jerusalem, the high priest became a royal appointee responsible for collecting tribute and maintaining order. Religion and administration fused. The Greek model of the polis, with its cults and gymnasia, required an ideological glue. In Judea, that glue became a new invention built from old myths. The men who served Antiochus III and Antiochus IV understood that myth could be governance. By standardizing law and ritual under a single priestly center, they could transform a patchwork of shrines into one obedient province. To do that, they needed a story of divine origin. The fragments of older tales, the patriarch legends, the Exodus memory, and the covenant oaths were woven together into a single epic. It was presented not as a new charter, but as an ancient revelation rediscovered. The Torah was born as a political document pretending to be prehistory. Archaeology records the transformation like a sudden mechanical pulse. Before the 2nd century BCE, ritual immersion pools are nearly absent. Then in a few decades they appear everywhere. Stone vessels carved from chalk, used only because people now believed clay could become impure, become common household items. Synagogues begin to appear as organized meeting houses for reading law. The material culture changes overnight. A population does not spontaneously alter its diet, hygiene, and social calendar unless compelled or inspired by a new system of authority. That system was the Seleucid temple regime, soon inherited and expanded by the Hasmonean priest kings. The Maccabean revolt that later tradition glorified as a war for faith was in reality a civil struggle among Hellenized elites. When the Hasmonean family emerged as victors, they kept the same imperial machinery. They declared themselves both kings and high priests, combining sword and altar. To unite the province, they enforced one law upon all inhabitants. The Idumeans and others were compelled to circumcise and to accept the Torah code. This is the moment when Judaism first functions as a legal identity rather than a set of local customs. When a faith requires armies to impose its commandments, it is not an ancient heritage, it is a new bureaucracy. The Hasmonean rulers understood what the Seleucids had discovered. A unified law creates a unified tax base. The tithe became a religious obligation. The purity system kept citizens dependent on priestly mediation, and obedience to the temple became obedience to the state. The story of divine chosenness served to justify central authority. The temple cult was not simply worship, it was the filing office of a kingdom. By rewriting history as revelation, the rulers of Jerusalem turned obedience into holiness and loyalty into salvation. The texts that now compose the Hebrew Bible reflect that administrative genius. Linguistic layers betray their late origin. Aramaic phrases, Greek concepts, and Persian bureaucratic vocabulary run through them. The laws of Deuteronomy mirror the structure of Hellenistic charters, binding people to a central sanctuary and a single code. The supposed wanderings of ancient patriarchs mirror the moral geography of the new nation the Hasmoneans were constructing. The editing of these writings was not an act of pure theology, but a legislative process disguised as memory. The authors presented their law as a rediscovered covenant, so that the population would see obedience as return, not submission. Once the structure was in place, history was rewritten backward. Earlier regional cults were recast as idolatry. Competing temples were denounced as heresy. The newly standardized text painted the past as a long struggle to maintain purity against corruption, a convenient mirror of the current regime's propaganda. The Hasmoneans could now claim that every enemy of their policy was an enemy of God. When Rome later absorbed the region, it simply kept the framework. The empire preferred provinces with clear ethnic boundaries and a single law. Judaism became a recognized national religion within the Roman system, a tax-collecting and census-friendly category. When the temple was destroyed in the year 70 of the Common Era, the rabbinic movement inherited the blueprint and replaced the lost sanctuary with legal interpretation. The machinery survived under new management. Christianity, born from the same matrix, adapted the model again, substituting church for temple and grace for law, but keeping the same imperial logic of obedience sanctified as revelation. Viewed through this lens, the emergence of Judaism is not a story of divine continuity, but a case study in administrative creativity. The Seleucid governors needed order. The Hasmonean priest-kings needed legitimacy. Their solution was to compose a sacred constitution that appeared ancient but served immediate political needs. They engineered a system where civil duty and religious purity were identical, where the calendar and the treasury ticked to the same rhythm. It was a masterwork of control disguised as devotion. No archaeological layer shows a gradual evolution from the tribal cults of early Iron Age Israel to the Torah system. The change is abrupt, synchronized with political consolidation. No inscription before the 2nd century BCE speaks of universal Torah observance. No earlier text refers to a closed canon or to the complete law code we now possess. The continuity exists only in the rewritten story, not in the record. This is how institutional religion is built, by taking fragments of myth, forging them into a single law, and presenting the result as eternal truth. To prove it, one does not need conspiracy, only chronology. The pre-Seleucid record lacks the signs of Torah culture. The Seleucid and Hasmonean period introduces them all at once. The motives align with imperial administration. The beneficiaries are the ruling priests. The literary evidence shows retroactive editing to present the new as ancient. The verdict is clear. What the later world calls the faith of Moses was the charter of a 2nd century state. The power of this machine lies in its story. Once people believe that law came from heaven, they will defend it even against evidence. They will see archaeology as temptation and revision as sin. The rulers of that age built a self-protecting system. Question it, and you become impure. Obey it, and you become holy. It survives because it was designed to. The Seleucids may be gone, but their invention endures every time obedience dresses itself as revelation. Religion in this form is not eternal spirit. It is a social technology. It teaches identity through submission and virtue through conformity. It takes the messy diversity of human tradition and presses it into a single mold. The Seleucid Empire perfected that art in Judea. The Hasmoneans made it permanent. Every later institution that claimed divine authority learned from that model, knowingly or not. What began as administrative reform became scripture. What began as taxation became covenant. What began as propaganda became theology. And what began as the empire's need for control became humanity's illusion of timeless faith. The machine worked. It still does. Veritas lux mesher ara benuhra.